This is The Secret Lies Within, and I'm John Trevelyan. Hi, and welcome to our regular segment where we talk to and discover the wealth of creative energy and hidden talent in and around Great Dunmow. Because for a small town, there's a lot of ordinary people doing some pretty extraordinary things. For this show, I interviewed Sue McNicol. Sue works until the small hours of the night doing what she loves best, writing. Since her first novel, Cassandra by Starlight, was penned, introducing the debonair Bennett Saville and his lovely lady, Cassie Wallace, Sue has since written the two other books in her Starlight trilogy. Her latest novel, male romance Stripped Bare, became a bestseller. She lives in the rural village of Bocking in Essex with her family. Her plan is to keep writing as long as her muse sits upon her shoulder, and her dream is to one day be able to give up the day job and get that big old house in the English countryside overlooking a river where she can write all day and continue to indulge her passion for telling stories. I recently met up with her at Talliston House Gardens to discuss her work. Hi, and I'm sitting here talking to Susan McNicol, who's a romance suspense writer. Yeah. She's part of our Talliston Writers Circle, and she's agreed to come and talk with us this evening. You've written 6 novels? Is that
I
right?
have indeed, yes, six novels at the moment.
Yeah, and they're all out there. And you're also a member of the Romance Writers of America and Romance Novelists Association in the UK.
I am indeed, yes, and I'm also a PAN member of the Romance Writers of America, which means that you've made a certain amount of sales, so you get a certain decadence that goes with becoming a romance author that's sold so many books.
Right, good. Well, I mean, that is one of the great things about the Talliston Writers Circle is we've got people from published authors like yourself, all the way down to people who are just starting out, which is great. But thanks for coming and sort of agreeing to talk to us.
My pleasure to be here.
So let's just go through and find out a bit about you, because you were born in the UK, but you spent most of your early life in South Africa.
I did. I was born in Leeds in Yorkshire, not far from the county cricket grounds. When I was about 8 or 9, Mum and Dad went over to South Africa to work with Roberts Construction, or what it was then, Marion Roberts, and Dad took a contract out there and moved the whole family across. Right. Okay. So we spent the next 30 odd years growing up there, having children, getting a career, and then finally in December 2000 decided the crime had kind of got enough, so we decided to move across. Right. Back to the UK.
Yeah. And why did you move to the south of England rather than go back to sort of Leeds?
I was lucky enough that I had a very good friend that lived in Little Waltham in Essex. Mm-hmm. He lived in a huge vicarage out there, and he had plenty of room to spare for a family that was just arriving on the UK shores with very little. Right. So it just sort of happened. By that time, the kids were in school and had friends, and it didn't make sense to move them.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, obviously, this is going out on the Great Dunmow sort of community radio.
Yeah.
What do you think of Great Dunmow?
I love Great Dunmow. I think it's a wealth of talent. You can see that every time you look at the Talliston Writers Circle. Every time you come into Talliston and meet everybody that's here. There's a lot of really good people, and to be honest, one of the things that I've really enjoyed about the writing circle is the diversity of everybody that comes into it. Yeah.
No, it definitely is a growing group that a lot of people say some really nice things about, which is great.
As they should.
So getting on to more about your writing and that, because you haven't written all your life, have you?
No, I've dabbled in writing since I was a kid. So I've got unfinished bits of novels, as we all have, and poems and all sorts of stuff that's carrying on. But I really only started writing in February 2012 when I got inspired to do so by certain events that happened.
Right. Okay. And do you want to elucidate about what those events were?
Well, I was thinking of writing a novel based on an incident that happened in Essex, where there was a concrete bucket that fell from a motorway and landed on a woman's car, and she was fairly badly injured. And something along the lines of what would happen if that had been someone jumping, and how would they have felt, and what if two people had met as a result of that very tragic accident. Right. So I started thinking about a romance novel, and then when I started thinking about the romance novel, I started thinking about the characters. and had the inspiration for one specific character. I have a fangirl crush for the actor Benedict Cumberbatch, so it's now all over Great Dunmow Radio. Although it's not really a secret, I have to confess, because I think most people do it. And to be honest, I even get emails from my publisher with all sorts of Cumberbatch-related stuff to keep me happy.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah, and that was... He developed into an actor, the main character in the first book, and that just went from there.
Yeah, sure.
And that's how I got the first one started.
So that would have been writing around that book. I mean, obviously, he wouldn't have been as famous as he is now.
No, when I first got to know of him, he'd only kind of just started out, to be honest.
Right. Okay.
And it's actually been quite gratifying to see that there's quite a lot in my books that's actually happened to him since.
Yeah.
Because in my book, I actually write about him going into a major motion picture and things like that. And in fact, that's what happened afterwards. So life is, yes,
imitating art.
Definitely.
Yes. Okay. And what sort of drew you to the romance sort of side of things? And I said at the beginning, it's romance suspense. So what came first? I mean, obviously you said you had your story, but I mean, did you always want to write something with a central romance theme, or?
I have never written romance and I have never read romance.
Okay.
I am a thriller person. I like detective, psychological fiction. I like horror. Where it all came from, I have no idea. It just became something that needed to get out. And as the book developed and the story developed, I did see it becoming more of a romance. But there's quite a lot of action and suspense in it, as you mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely ended up being a romance. And once I started doing a bit of the research for it and figured out that that's probably where the best place was to pitch such a book,
right,
then that's how I kind of decided to write it.
Okay. And what cycle of in the writing did you decide that you had something that might be publishable? Did you start out wanting to write a book to publish, or did you write it? Was it just the idea and you started just writing?
And this is where I make a total fool of myself. Because I had the idea originally to write a screenplay. Because I thought that if I wrote a screenplay, I would be able to one day maybe write a TV series.
Okay.
And Mr. Cumberbatch would actually star in such a TV series.
So it's just a way of meeting this person. You sort of orchestrate this. Yeah.
And as I started looking at screenwriting, I discovered that screenwriting is a lot harder to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, you know what, I'll write the book first and then I'll write the screenplay.
Okay, so covering writing, because you're quite prolific, aren't you?
I am indeed, yes. I do tend to start off at a tangent and not stop.
Right.
So I found that once I'd started writing the first Cassandra book, then I just had to keep going, and eventually I had a trilogy of those three.
Okay, so what's the title of the first book?
The first book is called Cassandra by Starlight.
Okay.
That's a series. That's a series. The second one's called Together in Starlight, and the third one will be out sooner or later, as soon as we find a publishing spot for it.
Okay.
But yeah.
As I said, you are quite prolific. So could you tell us a bit about how you write, when you write? Because at that, you've got a full-time job, etc., that you had to fit this writing around.
I did, yeah. I tend to write in the evenings when I get home. I perch my backside on the couch with my laptop because I do happen to like the distractions when I write. Okay. It was the same when I was a kid and studying. I couldn't do it in silence. I needed noise. I find it a lot easier to do that. Put the headphones on, listen to the music, and just tap away at the keyboard. And that's how all of the books that I've written so far have been done. I don't write them in a study. I simply sit there, and if I didn't, the family would probably never see me. So that's probably a better way to do it.
Yeah, sure.
Because I tend to get a bit carried away.
Yeah. Well, that's completely opposite to me. I mean, you're sitting in the office at Talliston here. I have to have locked away, quiet. I mean, I still have music on and things. But yes, I find, distractions, I need to get into that story. So
it's funny how everybody's different on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've talked about inspiration for the first book that got you writing. I mean, what about subsequently? I mean, obviously, if you wrote the first book, but obviously you were inspired by this new story on the first one. Yep. So how did you follow the story? How did you then say, we need another one? What's the inspiration for that?
I think the first book in the series created the inspiration for what happened, because I had a bit of a timeline that I wanted to go through from start to finish, from becoming the main character, Bennett, being an actor that wasn't all that well known, to being somebody that was actually at the end of the series as getting an award for his acting. And I think it just kind of took a natural progression through that.
Right. Okay.
So,
and then the third one, is there, I mean, did you have some sort of overarching storyline for all three? Will there be a third one and there will be a definite end to that, or will it still be?
There will be a definite end to the third one, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that series is now done and finished, and I'll be going on to other things.
Yeah, sure. You said about listening to music while you're on the couch.
Yes, indeed.
Is this on headphones, I take it?
It is on headphones because it's pretty noisy.
Is it? And what sort of music are we talking about?
We're talking Sneaker Pimps, Kasabian, Foo Fighters, Muse.
Right. So
we're talking quite a lot of indie rock, which
right.
tends to be the way that I go.
Okay.
I do listen to classical, Tchaikovsky mostly, because he happens to be my favourite composer, and my dad used to sit me on his knee with the 1812 Overture and actually tell me about the canons and tell me the story as we were going through it, so I've developed a taste. But yes, definitely lots of rock music. Okay.
And why do you think that particular music for this? Because it doesn't seem very romantic, does it?
It's not. I think because it's distracting, and I think because it's loud and it's noisy, and probably because you can't hear the words all that much, but you can hear the beat.
Right, yes.
So there's not much distracting, I think, from hearing dulcet tones of love and things like that. It's a lot easier.
Okay. And it would be quite interesting, I mean, to see if that informs how you write, because you're not somebody that does a great deal of pre-plotting or pre-sketching or doing drafts or whatever. Can you tell us a bit about your method?
The method is sit down, fingers to keyboard, write the first line and wait and see what happens. I do have, obviously, some character developments that I do, so I know more or less who my main characters are going to be, what their main characteristics are, physical and emotional. Probably for 3 or 4 of them. The rest simply creep in as and when the story needs them. Mm-hmm. I keep a timeline, so anything significant that happens gets logged in a spreadsheet, because the worst thing I find is going back into the story to say, well, how long ago did he do that? So that you don't trip yourself up in weeks and months and days. But other than that, I have a very broad one-pager that says I'll start here and I'll finish there. What happens in between is up to the muse. Yeah, sure.
Okay. And what about other people that you read, other authors?
I used to read, I still do. I read a lot of Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Jonathan Kellerman with his psychological novels of Alex Delaware. There seemed to be a bit of a trend towards those sorts of novels. Mm-hmm. Recently, though, obviously because of a genre that I've actually recently gone into, I'm reading a lot more in the male romance genre, and out of those I have a couple of really good favourite authors like Josh Lanyon and Sue Brown, and people like Sarah Madison.
It's quite interesting, because when you are a writer, I find that I read one book that I should be reading because it's in my genre or whatever, and then I read another book because it's a recommendation from somebody or whatever. But you do find yourself thinking, oh, I must read this because this is the sort of thing, so it's quite nice that you enjoy that as well. Outside of writing, what else do you do? I mean, obviously writing is taking up a lot of your time.
Writing takes up a lot of the time, probably about 50% of it. The rest is, as you probably know yourself, is all social. Mm-hmm. It's getting the news out there, it's getting yourself seen. That takes up a lot of time, but that is also quite a lot of fun, because we do a lot of role playing and promotional stuff that's actually is quite exciting to do. Do a lot of walking down by the coast. My husband's actually a photographer, so he tends to like to take the camera, and we go down and do a load of shots and make sure that he gets his creative abilities when I'm doing mine. Yeah, sure. Because that's one way of kind of keeping everybody together when we're not actually talking. I'm writing, he's not. Yeah.
And you said about the social aspect, I mean, we've talked about this with the group in the Talliston Writers Circle. Yeah. That's becoming a lot more prevalent, obviously, for authors, and also for authors to do their own promotion.
Yes. I think the days of the publishers, or expecting a publisher, whether you are traditionally published or digitally published or print version, whatever, the days are most definitely over of accepting the publisher to do everything.
Yeah.
It is without a doubt up to the author to build what they call their author platform and make sure that they get their name out there just as much.
Yeah. You're a great proponent of an author using Twitter, Facebook.
Yeah.
You've also just recently, with your latest book, blog tours.
We've done a lot of blog tours with the latest book because of the speciality of the genre. It's we've actually got a role play account, which has really done a lot to actually promote the book out there, because on Facebook there are role play accounts where you create your characters and you speak on Facebook through your characters.
Yeah.
And people tend to get to know them, and in fact sometimes it's a bit scary because they tend to think they're real. And it can get a little bit out there, and you need to be aware of that. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, but it is a very good way to get your characters out there, that people think they know you, so they'll buy the book.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's very important, that message to go out to authors, because with the published authors that come to the group and everything, and also the guest speakers that we have along,
we've seen those.
Everybody is saying that, social networking and social media is really important.
It's no longer just the publish. I think the old days of I'm a writer, you take it, you promote it, I'll just write the books, that's definitely gone. And I think you definitely need to have that expectation that you're going to have to do a bit more than you did, and you're going to have to make the time for it.
Yeah, sure. But you see the return on that. I would assume that you said it's quite rewarding.
I think I can honestly say that the last book would not have done as well as it has if I hadn't done the role playing, made the contacts on Facebook that I have of other authors in other countries like the States, supporting me, encouraging me and keeping me going, and also promoting me on their rather large friendship sites and things like that. That gives the exposure. So yeah, it's definitely...
Do you think we're moving towards... obviously people are self-publishing their books now and things like this. And the internet and exactly the platforms that you're talking about is giving people the ability to go head-to-head really with major publishers and things. Surely that's only a good thing.
Yes, I think so. I think that the world is going digital. I'm a digital child myself, so as much as I don't really like the fact that maybe published books and hard copies and things like that are going out of vogue ever so slightly, because I think there'll always be a space for them. The world has become digital. The audience is getting younger, which means that digital is the future for them, because that's the only thing that they know, and it's something that you've got to adapt and carry on with.
Yeah, I know that the books that I've actually physically bought recently are the books that are just my favourite authors that I want an actual physical copy, and I think physical copies are something that it's like polarising. People will read digitally, but they'll own their hardcover first editions or whatever, from their authors. So what's next for Susan McNicol?
Next is I have another book due out at the end of the month, which is the second in my male romance series. It's a standalone one to the original one. It's not a sequel or anything. So that's due out at the end of October. I have another one which has been written and submitted to my publisher, and that'll be out, I'm hoping, December, hopefully in time for Christmas. And then next year I will start working on a new series which is called Men of London, which is a 6-book novella series that they've asked me to write. And I'll be starting work on that, planning and plotting a bit more on that one, because I think it might take a little bit more plotting to do a series of that magnitude than it will just to do a standalone one.
Okay. And when you say a novella, what sort of, like smaller books in a series?
Yeah, it'd be about 50,000 word count on those. So, sort of probably half the length that I normally write. There
are going to be a lot of people actually listening to this who feel that they've got a story in them and stuff. What sort of advice would you say for people who don't write as much as they would like, or have got a story and haven't started anything yet? Well, how would you say get started?
I think you literally have to, and I think the group motto probably says this, doesn't it? I can't quote it verbatim, I can't remember it. What is it, John?
It's writers write, everyone else makes excuses.
Exactly, and I think that's very, very true. I think that you need to sit down, stop making the excuses, and write what it is that you want to say, but at the same time, you probably need, it is always worthwhile to get some sort of a creative writing course or something under your belt just to help you in the latter parts. But by all means, just sit down and write what it is that you want to do.
Okay. And what do you think that you get out of being a part of a writers group?
Part of the writers group, I get support. I get to come here and do amazing things like this that in the past I would never have done. I get to meet people that are different, that are creative, that actually know exactly what I'm going through when I'm writing, and I'm solitary and I'm like the bear with a sore head, that they actually understand exactly what it is that I'm going through with the frustrations with family and work colleagues, and can contribute to my well-being in that they actually know. They know what you're going through.
Yeah. Well, it is a very misunderstood sort of art, and it is quite, as you said, it's quite solitary. You can't particularly write in tandem with anybody, whatever. I mean, even books that have two authors' names on them have all been written separately
and put together.
And what do you think? I mean, this might be a tricky question, but what do you think you bring to the group?
I'd like to think I bring support to the group. I'd like to think I bring some witticism. We've had a few laughs in the group at my expense.
We have.
So I think there's that. And I think I would hope that the knowledge that I've had in getting the journey that I've actually travelled in starting a book right as an absolute green, fresh behind the ears person to actually where I am now would help the other guys make sure that they know what they're doing and give advice wherever I can.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is why we have guest speakers in.
Yeah, I think it is important to try and take some of the knowledge and the pitfalls that you've had, as well as the successes that you've had, to try and encourage everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons I set up the group, was because, you know, I'd finished a series of books, and I really felt that there must be people out there who would, like you said, understand what I was going through to try and create the next book or whatever, or the next things. So that's fine. What does it feel like when you hear that your first book's been accepted to be published?
Well, to be honest, I didn't really believe it. I thought it was a bit of a joke. I thought maybe somebody was pranking me. So I sent another email back and saying, "Are you absolutely sure you've got the right person?" And they thought that was very amusing. They thought it was British humour. But it wasn't actually. It was me being paranoid. So, yeah, and when they first came back and said, "We love the story, it's great, we can see something in it, but it needs a lot of formatting," because, you know, my talent is not one for formatting. And I've never done a creative writing course. I don't know how you're supposed to write for publication. I have learnt a lot since then, come in leaps and bounds. And, the champagne was cracked open and everybody was told. And that was it. Okay.
And who was that with, your publisher?
The publisher that I'm with is Burroughs Publishing. There's a bit of a story. You'll have all heard on in the previous dialogue that I have a thing for Benedict Cumberbatch. The reason I went with Burroughs is because when I started doing some research on him, I managed to link up with a fairly well-known London composer, and he'd worked with Benedict Cumberbatch in Frankenstein in the National Theatre.
Right, okay.
Because I was writing about theatre and film, Alex very kindly offered to give me any guidance that I needed on backstage issues and things. For some strange reason, once we'd linked in, I got a LinkedIn invite from Burroughs Publishing. They must have been somewhere in his contacts.
Right.
And I thought I'll file it away for future, because I see that they're obviously, you know, interested. And of course, when I first wrote the book, they were the first people I thought to.
Right.
So that's kind of how karmic it all happened.
Yes. No. It's always it always seems to happen in a weird way.
Yes.
I don't think. I mean, from some of our guest speakers, I don't think any of them have had the normal process that you're supposed to go through. Nobody has actually followed that in the publishing of the first book. I remember
the last one saying something very similar.
Yes. Where's the best place to go and sort of find out? Is that through your website or through Amazon, or what's?
Probably my website is the best one. So it's literally just www.susanmcnicol.com.
Okay.
The other one would be to look for Burroughs Publishing and look through the go into the author section, and all my books will be listed under there.
Right. Okay.
I'm on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else, so I think wherever you can have a presence, I'm probably there. But certainly my website would be the first port of call.
Okay. So thanks for coming and talking to us.
My pleasure, John.
It's been very enlightening. And you are just one of a set of very talented people who come to the Writers' Circle. Quite amazing in such a small town. How many people
actually? Yeah, there's a lot of writers and bloggers, and everybody's different. So thank you very much for having me.
No, that's great. And every success for your new ventures.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Secret Lies Within was produced by me, John Trevelyan, with the support of Talliston House Gardens. It's a project where ordinary people have taken an ordinary place and transformed it and themselves into something quite extraordinary. Find out more at talliston.com.